Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today we're going to be talking all about roof space and the ability to actually create opportunities out of absolute thin air. Okay, there is a thing called air rights, and a specialist in air rights is a good, is our guest today, special guest Warren Livesey from Buying Airspace. Warren, welcome to the channel, mate.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mate, air rights is one of those things that I've had an idle curiosity on for a very, very long period of time, but the sheer number of unknowns has had me a little bit perplexed up until to date. But in having conversations with you, my curiosity is now piqued, my friend. And so what I want to do is see if we can also pique the opportunity for everybody else out there. So firstly, who is Warren, and what's your experience in this space, mate?
Brilliant. So Warren Livesey, I'm the founder of Buy Airspace, as well as the founder of the Association for Rooftop and Airspace Development. And that's ultimately looking into Australia, New Zealand, London, New York, and Canada. And I've been doing this for the last 25 odd years, 10 years in London and New York, where I've done a number of airspace developments. It's quite prominent over there. And then come over here to Australia and been doing it for the last 15 odd years. But it's only really kind of coming to the surface presently now.
Yeah, very good, mate. So look, I'm going to ask the dumbest of all questions because a lot of our people out there don't even know what airspace is. So just give us a little bit of a, not necessarily a legal definition, but I guess an explanation of what airspace is.
Great. So when you buy land, the Latin definition ultimately says that you own the airspace from heaven to hell. So you have everything, that part of it. It's just the government and councils that restrict how much of that space that you get to use. So what you'll notice when buildings can build up to 9 odd meters and the building is presently at 6. There's that 3 meters of airspace that can actually be built into. And that's ultimately the airspace that we're looking at, is where it's actually been authorized that we can actually build up into it to actually meet that council alignment. And you can actually exceed that height by certain negotiations with your existing councils.
Yeah, and this has come about because way back when buildings were actually built, the zoning at the time may have said, let's just say 3 stories. Now that we've got higher density and rezoning has occurred and a long period of time has occurred, the opportunity has now been, or the land has now been rezoned for a different number of levels. But the intrinsic value of the dwelling itself does not make it commercially viable to actually knock down and then rebuild back into the exact same space. So this is just an opportunity to kind of tack on top and I guess squeeze the missing element that is sitting there. So how long's this been a thing, mate? You've just mentioned how long you've been in the game, but how long has air rights and building into this airspace been a thing?
Oh, look, I dated it back to the 1950s or 40s, and predominantly in Europe, where they've actually started to live in their roof space. So, opposed to in Australia, where we see a roof as a covering a building, and then you got your top floor area. In Europe and the UK, people are actually now living in the loft areas, I guess, and expanding that level. So, where they're doing density really well is they actually utilize all the unused space in a building. So look, it's very popular overseas, of course, because of their density issues. But primarily, it's coming to the surface now in Australia because we're needing more dwellings, and we've obviously expanded our envelope quite wide. We're needing to do more infill kind of urban growth.
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot of talk by all of the state governments at the moment with regards to our housing crisis that we're actually under, and pretty much every state government is going through a process of how do they actually unlock some of these opportunities. But this is a space that I think all of the state government legislation people have completely missed is what do you do where there is an existing building with the existing intrinsic value that is just not commercially viable to knock down. How do we unlock this? So I guess for all of the politicians out there that write down planning schemes, this is aimed at you guys. Let's see if we can educate them as well as our audience, mate. What are the 4 key factors that make tapping into airspace, I guess, an ideal opportunity?
Well, yeah. So there's 2 parts to it. I'll just go over the first part. Is in Australia, ultimately our main, the main focus has been to knock down and rebuild. What we're trying to do with airspace is ultimately to keep the existing infrastructure and build up. So we're just trying to give owners 2 options. But primarily, airspace provides an opportunity to build more individual homes in and around our existing infrastructure. So these are buildings that obviously are around hospitals and train stations and transportation hubs that we're not using enough. So we can actually build a large number of buildings, as well as the new homes on top of the buildings themselves provide or generate quite a large amount of capital or funds for the building owners, and they can use those funds to kind of repair their building, their capital works, as well as rejuvenate it, and in some instances actually pull money out of it.
Yeah, and
Thirdly,
which is perfect, because a lot of those buildings are old and they're looking tired. So this is an opportunity to keep people living exactly where they are, but refresh the look and feel of the property. I guess put some more modern features into it. Give it a facelift, bit of lipstick on the pig sort of thing.
absolutely.
So provides a huge amounts of capital into there. But the key thing, I think, was one of the ones that we touched on before. The existing owners don't have to go anywhere. It's not like we're kicking them out of home. So
That's exactly the point. And that's what I was saying, that our present strategy is to, ultimately for owners to sell to a developer, move away from their community, and then the developer builds this big concrete, very carbon intensive building and sells it to the highest bidder. And it's a bit of a shame. Really. So this is an opportunity where owners don't have to go anywhere. They can stay invested, they can stay living, and they can obviously participate in the uplift of their particular building without having to knock anything down.
yeah, and as part of that not knocking it down part, we're repurposing or upcycling, for want of a better word, the existing infrastructure, which makes this a very, very green housing solution, because we're not raping and pillaging the earth to take more resources, but repurposing what we've already done in the past.
Right, like we were all brought up to be able to look after what we've got and make the best of what we have. It's not this like knock over and just rebuild. Where some instances it could be cheaper to rebuild. What we're trying to do is get people thinking about the carbon aspect of this, because, and that's the fourth point, is that airspace is the greenest housing solution out there. Ultimately, we are locking in the carbon in that existing building, so it's not being knocked down and being sent through to the dump. Then we're putting a carbon neutral rooftop home, and primarily it's normally only 1 to 2 stories. We're not going anything more than that because of the structural integrity of the building. And then obviously because we're keeping that building, we're not having to build a second building, which is obviously full of concrete, which is the number one pain for the environment. The actual manufacturing of concrete or cement, should we say, produces about 8% of our carbon emissions, not far off what cars do. So we actually need to prevent or try and keep or preserve what we've got, opposed to just starting from scratch again.
And here I was thinking it was the cows that we were causing all the
No.
so I can keep eating my steak so long as I can keep repurposing airspace.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good to know. That was a joke, folks, for those of you out there that are vegetarian. Okay, folks. So we mentioned the fact that this has been happening for a long time overseas. So this is a global phenomenon. It's very new to Australia. Where is this being done really well elsewhere in the world?
The most prominent place would be London. Since 2020, they've actually approved 180,000 new airspace homes.
Wow.
New York as well as Toronto. Toronto's 42,000, Paris 39,000, Barcelona it's close on 28,000, and this is all since 2020. So it's as much as a new phenomenon here, but it's definitely become more prominent over there. Where during COVID, everyone kind of says it was been the immigration that's been a big part of it, but actually, when I speak to my colleagues overseas, it's actually been the divorce and the breakup of families during COVID because they were all locked in and didn't have space to kind of walk away from arguments, and so people are needing to find new homes, and this is what has added hugely to the property crisis. But yeah, Australia is still very, very new, and it's predominantly very difficult here without implementing new framework in order to unlock the actual airspace.
Yeah. So let's talk about the potential. So how many opportunities, plausible opportunities? Obviously, every single one needs to be assessed on its own merits. But how many existing strata properties actually exist out there that we could be tapping onto the top of?
Yeah, so all in all, we have about 340,000 strata blocks. 92% of our strata blocks are actually 20 lots and less. So when people think of, going up on top of a stratus block, they're thinking of these big blocks. And any strata block which is 50 lots or more, there's only about 2% of them. So really, our huge focus here is the older blocks. The post-war, the anything built up until 10 years ago that are solid compared to what we do have here. But yes, so we're ultimately focusing on the ones with a pitched roof that have these concrete tiles that ultimately are non-fire compliant and ultimately a waste of space and leaking. So we're trying to focus on readapting or reusing that particular space.
Yeah, so we'll dive into some of the things to look for in a couple of secs, but I guess just trying to understand the opportunity, and we specifically said strata here as opposed to, I guess, someone else's house. So if it's your own personal house, adding another story on, you don't need to buy air rights off anyone, folks. Like, it's you. Just do that, right? But we're talking about where there's many owners in a corporation. So the name of these change around the country. So in some areas it's called an owners corporation. In other areas it's called a body corporate. In other areas it's called strata management. But fundamentally, it is a group of owners in a complex that have some unique individual space that is designated for themselves and some common space. And so there's a strata management or a body corporate that actually controls the management of the facility, which then can cause some, excuse me, can cause some issues and challenges in trying to get all of the owners to actually agree. Now, interesting side tangent. We're talking here today about air rights, but strata actually means air because we're subdividing three-dimensionally with, I guess, shared walls and shared roofs and ceilings and that sort of thing. So all we're really doing is tapping back into those strata management and just giving them a bit more air. So that in itself can cause some challenges, mate, in engaging with those strata management organizations or body corporates. Where do you see some of the issues in that space?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that the airspace on the roof is actually owned by the top floor owners. I know that seems weird, but it is all common property. The whole building, the whole strata block is common property. You actually buy into the building, and because you're a part owner of the building, you get ultimately a percentage or access to an individual apartment. So that's a lot of people kind of contemplate that this is my apartment, and I don't have to worry about those other parts where it's not true. They're part owner, all of it. But yes, the challenges ultimately have been derived from these older blocks getting having a lot of capital works needing to be done to them, and the strata owners don't actually have any facility in order to pay for it. So they can either obviously increase their quarterly levy, they can do a special levy when they're doing these works. But what Airspace does is it provides a third option where they can actually sell an asset, being their roof space, and using the equity from that particular asset to actually fix up their building.
Yeah, so some of the issues and challenges that they might be having, predominantly due to the age of the building. So there might be things like, hey, we need to, paint the facade. It could be that the fire compliance is no longer in place. It could be the roof is leaking. It could be, hey, the lift that was in there, if there's a lift, sometimes in many instances there's no lift, the lift is no longer serviceable, or hey, I'm just getting old, and if this is a walk up, I don't want to go up and down stairs anymore. How do we actually put a lift in? So there's a whole bunch of things where that capital could actually be injected into the property, and as we said before, freshen it up and make it look brand new and shiny, and so given that's the case, you would think that most of the the owners would be sticking their hand up, because to do most of those capital works, they've got two choices, three now. Two choices: one, put up with it and let it continue to decay and rot, or two, contribute significantly into the sinking fund, which is then going to hurt their hip pocket, or three, the air rights opportunity, which previously they probably didn't even know existed.
Well, that's right. Look, majority of the buildings, the most common strata block, and I say strata is just one part of it. We can do airspace above shop tops, above commercial. I'm just focusing on strata because it has the largest opportunity and the largest amount of airspace above it. But yeah, so it's generally fire upgrades that trigger these concerns. There's council saying, "Hey guys, you need to fix up your fire operation." People's going, "Well, we don't have any money." It's the old electrics, it's the plumbing that's gone, it's the brick ties, the roof is leaking, So on average, every strata block has a minimal of $500,000 required in their capital works plan in the next 10 years, generally, to fix them off. And like you said, people have been kicking the can down the road to when they're actually going to do it, where Airspace actually provides an opportunity to actually pay for all of that. So instead of the owners actually having to pay money out to fix their building, they actually get their building fixed up and predominantly get money from it as well.
So I guess that begs the question, and as crazy as it sounds, are we actually looking for old properties that are actually starting to rot? And is that the in for us to actually start a conversation with these guys, or do we want something that's maybe a little bit old but less of an issue? Like, where's the true opportunity?
It's in the older blocks. It's in this is the sector that's been the most not being focused on. These newer blocks, people don't really see any kind of advantage from it. These older blocks, where they know that the carpet needs to be replaced, the building needs to be painted, they obviously got this in their mind that there's obviously a large amount of money and time needing to be spent on the building. This now provides a solution in order to do that. So I'm an accountant, so ultimately the roof space is seen as a liability. You have to replace it and repair it for a period of time. But funny enough, if you title it and you put a title over that airspace, you can actually sell it and create an asset from something that's a liability. So you're actually making money out of thin air, literally, as you say, strata. So it's just something that a lot of people haven't been thinking about or haven't thought about. Not everyone's super keen about someone living above them or up in the roof. However, if it means that they don't have to sell out or move, and that can cover the $1 million worth of capital works, you'd be amazed how many people out there are open to the suggestion of airspace.
Yeah. So obviously, from a negotiations perspective, there's a lot of complexity to this, because the person that's currently on the top floor believes that they're in the penthouse, and then all of a sudden they are no longer in the penthouse. That sort of thing, I'm sure it starts to factor in, and distributing how much of that capital works goes to which particular owner and in what particular ratio. So how do you commonly deal with that particular element?
Look, it is certainly a challenge. Most of the owners in those predicaments have tried to buy the roof from the owners' corporations, and that's where a number of these attic conversions have come from, where people are building up into the roof and they put in these little pokey little dormer type windows. But primarily where the owners, they realize that a huge amount of money has to be pulled together in order to fix up the building. That 500 up to $1 million with in some instances, they're not going to be able to provide that themselves. They know that a better looking and a better use of a building is far greater than having a so-called penthouse in a derelict type building.
Yeah, very good, mate. So, okay, so we understand what the opportunity is. We understand the, I guess, the number of opportunities that are actually out there. So when we're starting to assess a property, doing a drive-by in the street, what am I looking for? What's the thing that's going to stand out to me to say, hey, that's a good opportunity? Is there any physical aspects of the building that are going to stand out?
It's the peak roof. And looking at a building where there's a building next door to it that's higher than that building itself would be the pick one. But ultimately, those peak roofs it's an empty space. It's unused empty space. You've already got the height, so you're just taking that triangular part away, and you're putting a lightweight structure on top of it anyway. So every building that you generally walk past, and I'm talking about more of the 4, 6, 8s, 12s, even 20 odd units, not the bigger ones that have been built recently. That I don't believe they are, they're the easy pickings. It's the older ones that you're looking for that you can see that need some love and attention. And this is a way of adding value to that particular asset.
Yeah, well, some of those newer ones are falling down already, so they need some love and attention too. But that's a different problem. We don't want to add to that issue.
No, no.
Okay, so we're looking for pitched roofs, and you mentioned this in our pre-interview chat. Everyone would anticipate that putting, I guess, an extra floor or two on top of this would be an extra lot of weight from an engineering perspective for the building.
Yeah.
But the pitched roof itself, in many instances, is actually concrete tiles and has a huge amount of weight itself. So just the sheer, I guess, fact of taking that roof off has freed up some, I guess, structural capacity within the building. Typically, how does that kind of translate with regards to, I guess, weight differentials and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so obviously depending on the style of the building, but you're absolutely right. So the concrete tiles look at about 100 kilos per square meter. So your typical block of 4 or 6 or 8, you're taking off 6 to 8 tons worth of old concrete tiles, and you're putting on 13 tons of a new lightweight structure. So when we say airspace, the real opportunity is not building another 8 stories or another, on top of that existing foundations. It's really creating a roof level, if not maybe 2, but ultimately using the roof level for dwellings opposed to this empty space that we got at the present moment.
Yeah. Okay. So, rightio, you've sold me on that it should be done.
Right.
Let's start to look at how do we actually do this, right? So we're going to take the roof off. Now, everybody, I guess, on the floor below, suddenly for a period of time while they're doing the construction, they're just looking up to the sky for a period of time. How do we actually manage this process, I guess, and what's the timeline to actually make this occur?
Right, so very big overseas is modular, because they can actually build the rooftop addition elsewhere off-site, and they truck it in, and they crane lift it on. So you're minimizing, instead of no one living in an apartment block wants to be wrapped around with scaffolding for a period of time. You already got everybody saying, oh, don't want to live through a construction site. So ultimately what we're trying to do is we put the scaffolding up on all sides of the building. We put a plastic cover over the scaffolding itself, so it looks like a top or like an umbrella I guess you could say, if the weather is bad. But on the day that the mover comes through, it's ultimately all the different stages of the build are crane lifted on top of the building itself. So you can actually get in overseas in London, they can put a new modular roof on within 3 to 4 days, opposed to it being weeks or months. But
Wow, that's pretty big. So it's just look at the weather forecast and go, okay, let's go, boys.
not dissimilar from someone just changing the rooftop. If getting a new tiled roof, they're going to have to rip the roof off anyway. But yeah, so what we're wanting to do is that it's not an open aired space for a long period of time. It needs
Yeah,
to be waterproofed very quickly.
and with the exception of the person on that top floor, predominantly everyone else in the building is pretty much able to continue living in the dwelling through the whole process.
Absolutely. Top floor, generally you have to move out for 2 to 3 weeks for the keen period, opposed to weeks and months and years that people are concerned about. But yes, there is just for safety more so than anything else.
Okay, so we're just going to kind of sticky tape one of these things on the top, right? So it's just lightweight construction. And generally, there's an image behind you as to, I guess, some potential with what these things can actually look like. But how do we actually attach that to the old roof space? Because the building was never designed
No.
for this to be attached, and it was instead designed for a roof to go on. So how do we engineer this to actually, I guess, bolt on?
Right. So basically the party wall. So imagine knocking off the peak roof. You would then have the party walls. So all the walls that would normally go up to the roof top, and they basically weld a steel frame over the top of that party wall. So it looks like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. So it's ultimately all the weight's going to be distributed directly onto those walls itself. And then, yes, it's a lightweight construction. So ultimately, it's predominantly wood and cladded with an aluminium type structure. So we're obviously looking at anything that's lighter than anything that's was used before in regards to the tiles. Um, but yes, it's ultimately depending on how strong the building is. Most buildings can take, anyway, the older ones can take 1 or 2 additional levels of lightweight construction once you've taken the heavy weight off. And if they are struggling to do that, there's ways to actually prop up the building. Number one is obviously brick ties, which is where they drill, like it feels like a drill bit between the 2 brick walls, just to strengthen it. As well as what they're doing at the present moment is they're actually taking the rear stairs out of the building because they're not needed anymore. We only need 1 fire stairs access or egress out of the building, and they're replacing it with a lift shaft. And that lift obviously allows access to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor, which is great for the existing tenants, as well as it provides the structural integrity to take most of the weight of the top floor if required.
Yeah, awesome. So look, all of that now says, right, we've identified that it's needed. We've identified there's lots of opportunity. We know that structurally we can actually make this happen. We know what some of these properties start to look like. Now I want to get into, I guess, some of the due diligence side of things and go, well, what are some of the typical problems that we're actually going to have in assessing I guess, a site and having to overcome it. And the first one, there's a few that come to my mind just off the top of my head. You touched on one there, which is, well, how now that we're actually going further up, nobody wants to walk up that many flights of stairs. So you just said, look, repurpose an existing set of stairs in order to put the lift well in. So that's a fantastic solution. But next problem, I'm thinking car parking. Like we're adding extra dwellings to a property. It's only got a finite number of car parks that are already in existence. How do we overcome those elements in order to convince council, who are sticklers typically for car parking requirements and have some pretty stringent rules? How do we convince them that what we've got's enough?
Primarily, yes. So car parks and schools. It really depends on where the actual building is located. If the building is located near public transport, is a big thing. And councils are actually changing their requirements for parking. You'll notice that just lately in a number of different states, they are reducing their requirement for parking. To an example, here in New South Wales, the new transportation orientated development, they're actually reducing it down to a half a car space, funny enough, per unit block. And the reason for that is that people aren't using their cars as much as they used to. Being the fact that there's public transport, but more to do with car shares and Ubers and taxis and scooters and people working from home. They're not actually using it as often. So councils are actually a lot more lenient. And yes, there is a hard and fast rule to parking, but they can submit a section 4.6, which ultimately allows them to diversify from the actual standard.
Yeah, so that section 4.6 you just mentioned is a New South Wales specific
Yep.
thing. So I guess there's going to be different, terminologies and different frameworks that you need to deal with all the way around the country. But
Correct.
predominantly, you're trying to look at the car parking rules that were in existence when the property was first created may be completely different to the car parking rules that are required now. So
Correct.
I guess being able to identify that, hey, there's enough in the dwelling is one thing. Then being able to convince somebody in the existing structure to actually give up a space, or I guess is something else, or we just don't give that space to the new property, which is the more common outcome.
Yeah, so it's in some instances where the whole block is tying into. What's been quite popular from overseas is they all join up to a car sharing type programs. So this is where council says, okay, of the block of 4 of you, we are very hard and fast in regards to parking facilities. But if you guys all sign up to car sharing, so people don't have their second car, they're only allowed one car. But yet they do, for their second car, they use as a car sharing. Councils are generally quite lenient in regards to that regard.
Yeah, and I guess tapping into what we said before, capital works programs and that sort of thing that are actually going to happen here, the purchase of the air right might actually purchase that shared car. It could plausibly also be an electric car that is fed by the solar that's on the roof. That is the but you've got to
That's exactly it.
You've got to think really, really cleverly here, folks, to make this an argument. And everyone goes, well, why do I need that second car? I've got this, and it's going to be free to operate and low maintenance, and so yeah, like okay, so that's car parking solved. What about things like how do we convince the body corporate or the strata management? How do we actually convince them that this is a good thing? Because in some states, you need to have an absolute unanimous decision from everyone that, yes, I want to do that. So one fly in the ointment kills it. In other states, it doesn't have to be 100%. So give us some insights into where this is going to be easier and some of the, I guess, the conversations that we need to have to convince them to get across the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you're not winding up a strata plan. You're actually adding an additional lot to it. So if it's a block of 8, you're going to have a 9th lot. So the 100% in some states is really winding up an actual strata plan and diversifying. But what's really stopped us and strata is, and my joke to it is, the 3 worst things in life is death, divorce, and a strata meeting. No one wants to do it. Like you first and foremost don't really ultimately want to work with your neighbors. You certainly don't want to go into a financial arrangement with them where you're putting your hard-earned money into it. And majority of the stratas, they don't have the experience all the time. Predominantly because it's a voluntarily type process. So really Rob, what actually unlocks the airspace above strata is changing the framework. And the framework presently is that in order for you to unlock the airspace, and if the strata were to do it themselves, there's 14 different points where they all have to vote. And in some states, they all have to vote unanimously. Some is 75% here in New South Wales. And there's 14 times that they have to vote that way. And that's what generally kills a strata redevelopment, is that during that process, people, might die or sell or lose their job or get ill, or, you have a change of chairperson, something happens there. So the new framework is ultimately to engage a developer or a project management team at the very beginning. And they actually only require to negotiate a call options contract where they need to vote that once, and the next 13 times that needs to be voted can be done by that project manager or the developer. So that really unlocks the whole process of everybody having to come back to the drawing board and invigorating the whole emotional aspect to it, but primarily financial. Strata owners are very concerned about a risk aspect. So to go through the council and to point out, to do a rooftop type development is risky. Council could say no. No strata block wants to spend, 20, 30, $40,000 worth in a DA just to be rejected. So ultimately, you needing to take away these pain issues in order to unlock it. So primarily provide the experience from a third party person, provide the finance, which has been done by the third party part, and also them the time doing it. And then at the end, they generally split the proceeds 50-50. So the developers make 50, and then the owners make 50%.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 14 steps. We don't need to list out all 14, but clearly there's conceptual designs, there's the planning application itself, there's approval of the architectural designs, which builder are we going to use. So there's a whole bunch of those decisions that need to be made along the way. And what you're basically saying is, look, do we want to sell the air rights? Yes or no? Like thumbs up, thumbs down. And at that point, stand back, folks. Let the developer who is going to be the best positioned to make those decisions on the engineering, the aesthetics, the visual aspect. They're invested in getting the most profit out of the project, which means that they're invested in getting the most profit for you out of the project. So if you let them, trust them to actually do what they do best, it's in the best interest of everyone.
Absolutely. And first and foremost, people have a real difficulty in valuing their airspace. So the beauty of actually sharing the proceeds at the end is that there's no one valuation that you've actually had to stick with. It's the profit is at the end is what it is, and that is shared, opposed to people believing that the airspace is worth 3 million or 2 million or $500,000. It's all price in the pudding at the end of it.
Yeah. Mate, that's super interesting. So you mentioned the fact that lightweight construction and trucking these in. I know that overseas modular construction is super popular, but there's not that many modular companies that specialize in this in Australia. Are we importing these modulars from overseas, or are there enough local companies that actually have the skill sets to do this now?
There are, and they're growing, possibly the fastest of anything. Where presently our focus is that in building a normal house, it's kind of like buying a kit car, as I joke, and you get various different parts of the kit car, and you make it in your driveway, and it's very noisy, and there's a lot of parking, opposed to just having a car pull up on your driveway, and you've got your car already there. So the beauty of modular, it's not only just the quality of it and generally cheaper, but obviously they can build it very quickly. But yes, it's becoming a very popular means, to a point where I don't know about all the other states. I know that New South Wales and various parts of the federal have committed about 200 million into modular as a potential housing solution for Australia. So it's growing predominantly.
Yeah, having been inside a modular factory and seen how it's actually put together, it's a really interesting process to watch when you're seeing the roof being installed onto a frame but the roof is on ground level, and so the roofer is not harnessed in. He's not wearing his stack hat. He's not wearing his all his. He's basically just stepped on, doing up some screws and then stepping off, and then goes to lunch, as opposed to all the scaffolding and that sort of thing. So look, there are efficiencies in the build, but the efficiencies come when you're doing many of these. When you're only doing one, and it's a bespoke one, which something like this would be, how does that compare price point wise versus somebody just turning up with, I guess, a piece of timber and a hammer and a couple of nails and actually building this? Cost wise, are we pretty much on par?
It's on par. Pretty much, yes. There's no huge savings. It's really got to do with the quality of build and the safety of it and the time aspect of it. So instead of a project lasting a year, you're in and out of there within 6 to 8 weeks. So you're not having to fund it for that period of time. Obviously, all the quality control is being done in the factory itself. And you don't have a chippy up there with a noise, with the saw going off, parking across the road and blocking someone's driveway. That's all been done off site. So ultimately, it's just a clever way of creating the actual asset elsewhere and then putting it where it belongs.
Yeah. And what other things? So I'm thinking back to some of our problems. In many instances, there's a whole bunch of existing infrastructure that's sitting on the roof. So that's where the ducted air conditioning goes. That's where the lift maintenance shafts are. There's a whole bunch of stuff up there. What are the things that we need to look out for in, I guess, either relocating or repurposing some of those things?
Yeah. So look, that's definitely not the low-lying fruit. The newer flat buildings with that infrastructure in place, it's more to do with the actual tiled roofs. However, yeah, all of that can be relocated quite easily. Up there can be water, obviously water tanks. There can be aerials. There can be lift overruns. Where the modern day lift, they don't require any more overruns. That one additional level, that little box on top of some of these, they can actually bring it straight to the roof itself. So it's just a case of looking at each one of them on their merits, getting the structural engineers and the service operators to negotiate and find where else that equipment can be placed. And if not, it just gets placed on the roof that you've just gone up. There's still a roof there. But primarily what we're trying to do is there's only 2% of strata have solar, and none of them capture any rainwater. So what we're really trying to do is provide that kind of equipment at the very least, that's going to be up there, that can be used, and obviously taking the rainwater and trying to use that for better aspects to it. But yes, it can be relocated.
Yeah, and there's also both challenges and opportunities. The capital works that we are talking about before, electrical upgrades, so upgrading the sub meter in the building in order to cater for the extra load and things like that. I guess the capital works need to maintain that stuff, but then this is now replacing that because it's adding more load.
Correct.
The opportunity for putting solar on there, those sorts of things. Now I'm looking at the picture that's sitting behind you, and it's a beautiful landscape sitting behind, but it looks like pools that are sitting there. Are they little tiny shallow pools just to look pretty, or can I put a lap pool up there as well, mate?
Look, if the building can take the weight, absolutely. Why not? I think this is the whole real beauty of this, is that the roof space is just unused. We have 100 million square meters of unused strata roof space throughout Australia. It's just unpurposed. It's unused. We're all looking for more space in our urban areas. We're looking for more social interaction with our neighbors. So be able to go and put a green roof or a roof structure up there, which may promote more social interaction with the owners. And also green roofs drop the urban temperatures. In some aspects in Europe, it can actually drop down by 4 to 5 degrees. The way we've had these kind of island heating scenarios where it's all concrete. So we're needing to get green. In some parts of the US, it's actually stated that 80% of the roof has to be a green roof. So that the good old days of this huge expanse of roof space is going and gone nearly. From overseas perspective, they are literally mandating green roofs as a requirement. So look, it's a lovely space that can be used for multiple reasons.
Very good, mate. Been an absolute pleasure getting to know this topic a little bit deeper. As I said, I'm super keen on actually executing one of these in the not too distant future myself. Now, Warren, you've said that you are actually going to come and present at one of our upcoming meetups in the not too distant future. So just for everyone's benefit out there, we run these events all the way around the country, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide on different weekends of the year. We're pretty much running an event most weekends of the year. So you can turn up physically, or you can also live stream all the way around the country. So no matter where you're located, if you want to know a little bit more about this topic, watch out for Warren coming to one of our upcoming events. Mate, been a pleasure. I want to thank you very much for your time here, and I look forward to, I guess, engaging with you when I do my very, very first deal, mate.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to share this idea.
All good. Thanks, folks. I'm going to say bye for now.
Cheers.